guys, I hope you're well. So, this evening's lecture is going to be focusing on Learning Unit 3. If you go back and look at your announcements, I shared that video with you guys that looks at Learning Unit 2. So, we're going to look at Learning Unit 3, where our focus is going to be on political economy, media freedom, democracy, and nationalism, specifically looking at media studies and obviously more specifically looking at it in terms of African media. And now it's important for me to state that it is African media. And the reason behind that is that each country within Africa has different approaches to our media, different approaches to how the media is run in terms of who has the power, who has control, and also how much freedom is given, and what is considered the norm in terms of nationalization and what have you. So every country within Africa that you research in terms of its media, you're going to get different viewpoints, different perspectives, because each country deals with this differently. So in our particular environment, obviously we're used to a South African perspective. If you think about your media studies one, where we did that whole learning unit on South African media, so that is obviously something that you're familiar with. It's a good point of reference, but it's also important to look at other countries within Africa to see how they handle the media in terms of control, power, and how much influence the country has or the government has on that media, because obviously that then influences the type of media freedom that is available within the different countries. Okay, so when we think about our South African media and we think about where we are today and the type of fighting and the amount of work that had to go in to ensure media freedom, we have an understanding as to why the media today obviously fights for this press freedom, using the democratic framework to support the media freedom and press freedom that we have, and that is it within our constitution. But before we get to democracy and thinking about what it means to have a democratic media, you also need to think about the fact that within Africa, we have a lot of countries that do not follow a democratic format. And we always hope for some level of media freedom and, being able to report truthfully, accurately, and all those things. But it's that other countries within Africa, there is a considerable amount of control still by the government when it comes to media and what is allowed to be released and what isn't. And what I would suggest doing is going online and going and looking up the different, of just not all, because we have over 50 countries within Africa, but go and have a look at some of our bigger countries. Go have a look at how Nigeria handles the media. Go have a look at how Namibia does, or Egypt. And what you will notice is that country by country will have different levels of democracy, freedom, and then that obviously directly correlates to our press freedom. And when we think about what we as South African people have fought for, you can understand why other parts of the world that still do not have that kind of freedom, why they can feel stuck and controlled, and in a lot of instances they feel like they don't have the ability to trust the media because of the lack of freedom that is available to them. So what a lot of other countries have, so I'm just sharing the next slide with you, is that a lot of them work on this concept of political economy. So this is something you also did look at in under the media theories in Media Studies 1. But your political economy is how much power and control your different organizations have over the media, for example. So if we think back to our apartheid era, there was very little ownership. The few lots of ownership of the media we did have were white dominated, and it was a few publications, organizations speaking to the masses, um, saying that it was the views of the country when it was actually just the views of the few. But the reason why that existed is that when you have a controlling government, when you have this political economy, the um, the power is placed on the few to influence the masses. So your political economy isn't only necessarily your government control, obviously with the word politics or political in it, your government involvement is obviously um, very prominent. And within our African countries, our African cultures, we see a lot of political influence over our media because of the lack of democracy and freedom available to them. So we do see a political control where government gets to decide what is viewed, what access people have to particular publications, information, and there's always this form of censorship and control. But your political economy can also be just those that have the power. So those that have got the financial power. So, for example, even though our media is meant to be free, fair, accurate, all those things, our SABC and what have you, or the SABC specifically, and all the publications and the different broadcasting platforms that they have, it's still funded by the South African government, it's still funded by the ANC. So because they pull the purse strings, we know of instances where the SABC has not necessarily acted in the most truthful and accurate manner because they don't want to bite the hand that feeds them. If you know Durban publications at all, um, the Mercury, Daily News, those are all owned by a person by the name of Iqbal Survey. Now, a lot of those publications publish stories that speak to him in a positive light. He has ties to the ANC, so sometimes stories aren't the most truthful and accurate. And it's that the power, the money, that is what speaks volumes. And what that can lead to is your Chomsky's propaganda model, which is very important to understand because when we think about colonization, when we think about how media was brought to a lot of these African countries, was through propaganda, through the colonizers coming in, taking over, and saying, we know what's better for you. We're going to decide what you should want to watch, read, listen to. So our media in the past, during colonization, should I say, it was very much the media was used as a tool for censorship, for control, for propaganda. And it's important to understand that because a lot of the African countries as we know them today, including South Africa, we are young. Our continent's independence is not hundreds and hundreds of years old like the UK and Europe and the Americas and what have you. So for a lot of our countries, there is still this um, dominance and there's still this oppression to a certain extent because we are still finding our feet, we're still finding our way to get out of this the use of media as a tool against the people of that particular country. So when we think about Africa and we think of the West, how the media is used for us, it was a way to control the population, where in the West, it was a way to promote particular lifestyles. It was used to support political views such as the Democrats or the Republicans, but it was used as a tool to um, bolster more so than where for us it was more for the propaganda and for trying to create a false sense of reality. So our media history, when people we often try to compare ourselves to America, to the UK, and what have you, but it's a very different perspective because they no one came in and took over them. Well, I'm talking about as they see them now as being dominant, obviously, especially in America. They obviously went and took over the land from the Native Americans. But what they see as being important, that then gets produced, and that is what gets distributed globally. Where our African media, we were always seen as backward, that we are less than, and our media, our African media, was either trying to emulate the West or what we're trying seeing now in this post-colonial era is trying to promote the African way of life. But it's not purely the African way of life. It's also this global perspective of what it means to be successful, to fit in, and what have you. So when you think about this political economy, you have to think about who has the power, and each country will be different. Is the power um, solely within the government because it's more of a dictatorship and they have the financial control, the political control? Are they the ones pulling and tugging on the strings of all the media within a country? Or is it the control of the different publications? Is there diversification of publications, or is it a small handful of publications still controlling, these big chunks of media? How is each country different in the way in which they produce, um, or sorry, the way in which the media is produced? And that political economy is super important to understand, because if we are trying to assess our media today and we're looking at it in this post-colonial era where we are meant to have more control, more Africanness, this Afrocentric approach, where does the political economy then fit in? Is it that our media is being reflective of the African people? Is it still just purely about political control, financial control, or is it shifting to have a more Afrocentric approach? Okay, and when we had this decolonization, and where we've now moved to this post-colonization era, it's that it there was a lot of African countries trying to take away what had been previously put in place by those that came and stepped in and tried to overrun the country or run the country or feel like they were in charge. So what we often have is post that, when we're in this post colonial era, we have what we call radical democracy, where we're trying to do so much in such a short space of time. So if you look at our South African media post apartheid, it went from, pretty much all white ownership, bar no, it was all white ownership. There was one publication which was African run. Um, and then suddenly going, okay, we no longer need the white man in power, we need it to be African ownership, all very quickly, which obviously is correct. It should be more representative of the African or the South African population, but it's that we try to do these things so quickly, and the media plays such a big role in promoting this democracy, promoting this post colonial environment, and actually putting forward this way of life, that we expect change to happen so quickly. It's like after apartheid, where everyone thought that in Mandela, within the 4 years, was going to revolutionize South Africa. It's physically impossible for him to make all the changes that were needed in those 4 years or within 8 years. It takes time. We're still 30 years young and we still are not where we should be. So what we have to think about is how we view ourselves within this particular context. Also look at how we are represented. Sorry, I don't know why I'm tripping over that word tonight. Within our own media, within African media, and within global media. Because often what happens is that in this decolonized era, when there's, even if there is democracy in place, because we are so untrusting of the media, we always feel that there's secrecy, that we don't take things seriously by using things such as caricatures and political cartoons to make fun of ourselves. That we look at things differently from the global perspective, but how far do we go? How much of the other side do we embrace, and how much of it do we push aside to have this more Afrocentric approach? All right. So just moving on from that. So I'm just checking, I'm giving the right page. Okay. Nope. That is the wrong screenshot. Sorry, I just took screenshots of the active learning just to guide us through this. Okay. And following on with that is, once you've thought about this political economy, what you also need to think about is nationalism. Okay. And this is where you believe your nation is more superior over every other nation that exists. And a lot of African countries do have a sense of nationalism, that because of the years of oppression and suppression and all those things, we have a very strong sense of pride in our countries now, because we want our own people to have the strength. But obviously, again, it happens very quickly. It needs to be reflected within our media, but not in such a way that gives us a false sense of reality, and that we think that this is going to um, that things are going to change overnight. It's that we should have this sense of pride within ourselves, but at the same time, we have to think about not only how a country stands alone, but how it fits in with global media within our African media. Because it's all well and good having a good sense of pride for our own country, and thinking about, how we are supportive of our own country, and that should be obviously reflected in our media. We also can't be um, blinkered and thinking that what's happening in the rest of the world and what's happening within that other media is not of value as well. So it's about finding that balance and thinking about what is important in terms of a global perspective as well as a local perspective, because you don't want to be like America, for example. I'm not dissing America completely, but they have such a strong sense of nationalism to the point where they can't see the wood from the tree. So they all have American flags hanging outside their houses, say that, they're the land of the free, yet they're the ones with the highest rate of school shootings, that have the anti-abortion laws, that have very strict laws in place that make it not be the land of the free. And it's that there is a um, blind sense of loyalty and nationalism to the country, which is very much reflected within the media, especially from a Republican perspective in the Republican media. And it can be problematic. So I think as South Africans, we are very aware of our own flaws. We laugh so we don't cry. So we do have a strong sense of nationalism, but at the same time, we're very aware of who we are, and we don't necessarily see everything as just perfect. We see our flaws, we choose to accept them, and continue to live in this country. So it's important to think of that concept of nationalism when working through this particular learning unit as well. Okay, right. Last thing, if you give me 1 second, just making sure I'm sharing the right one with you. Okay. Then lastly, when we're looking at learning unit 3, please excuse the noise, my dog has decided to come and lie in her bed next to me, okay, is how African media and how our global south is portrayed within the globalized media context. So if you think about our African media, we are marginalized. We're pushed aside. Where our media is seen as less than. We will go and watch Marvel box office films. We'll go and watch US celebrities, UK celebrities in films and what have you. And when we will watch, um, Housewives of Atlanta or whatever it may be, but we won't go and watch our own media. We won't engage with our own content because our global south is often pushed aside, belittled because there isn't as much financial wealth in the South, in our global South, except for Australia. And also, again, there isn't the media that is put out within the global South is doesn't have the same budgets, the same support, is that we have been almost brainwashed over the years by our global north to be seen as more important, and so we put more stock and more emphasis on that media as opposed to our own. So even if we're researching things that are going on in the world around us, we will tend to believe our international media before we will actually believe our own media. And what is important for you guys to think about is where we fit in terms of this global south, sorry, where we fit in terms of how the rest of the world sees us. Do we go and use our media as a tool to try and emulate the North? Or do we use our media to project who we are and who we want the rest of the world to see? And they want us to actually, value and see the beauty in our Africanness. And it's really important for us to understand that there is power within our global south, within our media, but it's that because of preconceived ideas of what our media is, the quality of it, the reach, because of the generations gone by of more prominence of our northern neighbors, it is a slow process, again, because we are young, for people to see the value and the importance within our global media, our global south media. Okay, so those are the main focus areas within this learning unit. Like I said, when you are working through this content, I would highly recommend not only using the textbook, but also going online and looking at the different countries or some countries within Africa and look at how their media is run in terms of political economy, in terms of nationalism, and also in terms of how other countries, especially in the north, perceive that particular country you're researching and how much value they put in that country's media. All right. I hope you found that helpful, and I'll chat to you guys soon. Bye.